On a frost-brittle Wyoming morning, Mara Whitlock slides a signed contract across the kitchen table. The ranch, all 800 acres of it, sold to a faceless corporation out of Denver. Across from her sits Cole Barrett, the silent neighbor who's fixed her fences and chopped her wood for 10 years without asking for a damn thing in return. His calloused hands flatten against the oak surface. "You can't leave." 3 words. A decade of careful distance shattered. What started as a deathbed promise to a best friend now feels like a live wire, sparking with something neither of them has dared to name. Because some truths don't surface gently, they explode. If you want to see how far silence can stretch before it breaks, stick with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The contract sat between them like a corpse. Mara hadn't meant for it to look so final, so irreversible, but there it was. 23 pages of legalese, her signature looping across the bottom in blue ink that hadn't quite dried. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and old wood smoke, the kind of scent that gets into the walls and won't leave no matter how many windows you crack. Outside, the wind worked at the loose shingles on the barn, a sound she'd stopped hearing years ago, but suddenly couldn't ignore. Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. "You can't leave," he said again, quieter this time. Like maybe if he didn't say it too loud, it wouldn't count as breaking the rules they'd lived by for a decade. Mara wrapped both hands around her mug, even though the coffee had gone cold an hour ago. "It's done, Cole." "The hell it is." She looked at him then, really looked, and felt something shift in her chest, some old foundation stone coming loose. He was 42 now, same as her, though he wore it differently. Weathered in a way that made him look like he'd been carved from the same granite as the Tetons visible through the kitchen window. His hands were scarred from 1,000 small ranch disasters, his face lined from squinting into too many sunrises. He hadn't shaved in 3 days, and his hair needed cutting, and there was a coffee stain on his shirt collar that she noticed because she'd been noticing things like that for longer than she wanted to admit. "Don't do this," she said, but her voice came out wrong, too soft, almost pleading. "Do what? Try to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life? You don't get to decide what's a mistake for me." "The hell I don't." He stood up fast enough that the chair scraped against the floorboards, a sound like a match striking. 10 years, Mara. 10 years I've been—" He stopped himself, bit down on whatever word had been about to come out, and she watched his throat work as he swallowed it back down. "Been what?" she asked. "Keeping a promise? Doing your duty? Playing the good neighbor?" Something dangerous flickered across his face. "That what you think this is?" "That's what it's always been." "You're wrong." "Then tell me I'm wrong." She stood up too, and now they were 6 feet apart with a table between them and 10 years of careful silence stacked up like kindling. "Say it out loud, Cole. Whatever it is you've been swallowing for a decade, just say it." But he didn't. Of course he didn't. Because that wasn't how they worked, had never been how they worked. They were experts at the unsaid, champions of the almost, masters of standing close enough to feel the heat, but never close enough to burn. Cole turned away, stared out the window at the ranch that had been her whole life since she was 23 years old. His ranch sat just beyond the western fence line, close enough that on quiet nights she could hear his dogs barking. 2 properties divided by a quarter-mile of scrub grass and barbed wire, and a silence so thick it had its own weight. "He asked me to take care of you," Cole said finally, his voice rough as creek gravel. There it was. The promise. The excuse they'd both been hiding behind since the day they buried Daniel Whitlock in the family plot on the South Ridge. "I know what he asked," Mara said. "I was there, remember? In the hospital room when he—" She stopped, throat closing up the way it always did when she got too close to that particular memory. "You kept your promise, Cole. More than kept it. But it's been 10 years. You don't owe me anything anymore. You don't owe him anything anymore." "This isn't about owing." "Then what's it about?" He turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. She'd seen Cole Barrett in every mood there was, laughing, angry, bone-tired, half-drunk, stone-sober, working through a fever because the cattle wouldn't feed themselves. But she'd never seen him look like this, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump or step back. "It's about—" He stopped again, shook his head like he was arguing with himself. Forget it. No. She moved around the table, closed some of that 6 feet of distance. You started this. You came over here, saw the papers, and decided to have an opinion about my life. So finish it. Tell me what this is about if it's not about the promise. You really want to do this now? When else are we going to do it? After I'm gone? The word hung between them, gone, and she watched it land on him like a physical blow. Where are you planning to go? He asked. Does it matter? It matters to me. Why? Because he dragged a hand through his hair, a gesture she knew meant he was buying time to think. Because this is your home, Mara. This ranch, this land. It's who you are. You leave here, you'll be… What? Lost? Adrift? Unable to function without 800 acres of Montana dirt? She heard the bitterness in her own voice and didn't try to soften it. I'm 42 years old, Cole. I think I can figure out how to exist somewhere else. That's not what I meant. Then say what you mean instead of dancing around it. But he just stood there, looking at her with those storm-gray eyes that had always seen too much, and she felt the frustration rise up hot and sharp in her chest. This is what you do, she said. This is what you've always done. You show up, you fix things, you stand there looking at me like… She stopped herself this time, backed up a step. I can't keep doing this. Doing what? This. Whatever this is. This thing where we… She gestured between them, trying to name something that had never had a name. I need to leave, Cole. I need to start over somewhere that doesn't have so many ghosts. Running won't make them go away. Maybe not, but at least I won't have to see them every time I look out my kitchen window. She regretted it the moment she said it, watched the words hit him and leave marks, because they both knew she wasn't talking about Daniel anymore. Cole's hands curled into fists at his sides. Is that what I am to you? A ghost? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The silence that followed had teeth. Mara could hear the old regulator clock on the wall ticking, each second falling like a small stone into still water. Outside, one of her horses whinnied, probably wanting to be fed, but she couldn't make herself move toward the door. I should go, Cole said finally. Yeah, her voice came out smaller than she intended. Probably. But he didn't move. Just stood there with his hand still fisted and his jaw still working and something desperate flickering behind his eyes. When? He asked. When what? When are you leaving? 2 weeks? Maybe less. Depends on when the lawyers finish the paperwork. He nodded slowly like she'd just confirmed something he'd been afraid to ask. And you're sure? About selling? I signed the papers, didn't I? That's not what I asked. Mara looked down at the contract, at her own signature scrawled across the bottom like a verdict. Was she sure? She'd been asking herself that question for 6 months, ever since the first offer came in. A development company out of Denver wanted to turn her ranch into a luxury resort, high-end cabins for rich people who wanted to play cowboy for a week without getting their hands too dirty. The money they were offering was obscene, enough to set her up for the rest of her life. Buy a little house somewhere warm where the winter didn't last 8 months and the silence didn't press down like a physical weight. I'm sure, she said, and tried to believe it. Cole made a sound low in his throat, something between a laugh and a snarl. You're lying. Excuse me? You heard me. You're lying to yourself if you think selling this place is going to fix whatever's broken. And what exactly do you think is broken, Cole? The question came out sharp enough to draw blood, and she saw him flinch from it. I think… He stopped, started again. I think you've been running from something for 10 years, and you're so damn good at it, you don't even know what you're running from anymore. That's rich coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? You want to talk about running? About hiding? You've been doing the same damn thing I have, just without leaving the county. She took a step toward him, felt her own anger rising to meet his. At least I'm honest about it. At least I'm not pretending that showing up every other day to fix my fences is some kind of noble sacrifice. His face went hard. I never said it was noble. Then why do you do it? You know why. The promise, right, the sacred deathbed promise to your best friend. She heard the mockery in her own voice and couldn't stop it. Tell me something, Cole. If Daniel hadn't asked you to look after me, would you even speak to me? Or would I just be the neighbor you nod at when you pass on the road? The question landed like a slap, and she watched him absorb it, watched something in his expression crack and shift. You really believe that? He asked quietly. I don't know what to believe anymore. He took a step toward her and then another, closing the distance between them until she could smell the soap he used and the wood smoke that clung to his jacket. His eyes were darker than she remembered, or maybe it was just the morning light coming in low through the window, casting shadows across his face. You want to know why I come over here? His voice was low, rough-edged. Why I fix your fences and chop your wood and show up when your truck won't start in January. You really want to know? Her heart was hammering now, pulse loud in her ears. Yes. Because he stopped and she watched him wrestle with something, saw it play out across his face. Fear and frustration, and something else she couldn't name. Because I can't stay away. Because every morning I wake up and tell myself today's the day I stop. Today's the day I let you handle your own life. And then I see your lights come on across the field and He stopped again, shook his head like he was disgusted with himself. Forget it. No, don't do that. Don't start something and then, what do you want from me, Mara? The words came out almost angry. You want me to say it out loud? Fine, I'll say it. This stopped being about the promise about 9 years and 11 months ago. This stopped being about Daniel so long ago I can barely remember what it felt like to do this out of duty. Instead of, he cut himself off again, turned away from her, and she felt something surge up in her chest, hot and bright and terrifying. Instead of what? She whispered. But he just shook his head, wouldn't look at her. The kitchen felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in, and Mara realized her hands were shaking. 10 years. 10 years of this careful dance, this elaborate pretense that they were just neighbors, just friends bound by a dead man's last request. 10 years of standing too close and backing away, of words left unsaid, and glances that lasted too long, and moments like this one that felt like standing on the edge of something vast and dark and bottomless. I loved him, she said, and wasn't sure why she felt the need to say it out loud. Daniel. I loved him. I know. He was good to me. I know that too. Then how can you... She stopped, couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't even finish the thought. Cole turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. You think I don't know it's wrong? You think I haven't spent the last 10 years hating myself for it? For what? For wanting... He stopped, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. For thinking about things I got no right to think about. For standing in your kitchen and forgetting that I'm here because my best friend died and asked me to take care of his wife. The word wife landed between them like a stone. I'm not his wife anymore, Mara said quietly. I haven't been his wife for 10 years. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. Why? She opened her mouth to answer and found she didn't have one. Or maybe she had too many answers and didn't know which one to say first. Because she was tired of being alone. Because the silence in this house had weight and teeth. Because every time Cole showed up at her door, she felt something wake up inside her that she'd thought had died with Daniel. Because she was 42 years old and scared that if she didn't do something, say something, change something, she'd wake up at 60 still living in this mausoleum of memories and missed chances. I can't do this anymore, she said instead. Can't do what? This. Us. Whatever we've been doing for the last 10 years. She gestured helplessly around the kitchen. I can't keep pretending it's normal the way we... She stopped, tried again. You're over here more than you're at your own place. You know my schedule better than I do. You fixed my porch railing last month and I didn't even ask you to. That's not normal, Cole. That's not what neighbors do. What is it then? The question hung between them, dangerous and bright. I don't know, she admitted, but it can't keep being what it is. Something in his expression shifted, hardened. So you're running. I'm leaving. There's a difference. Not much of one. I need a fresh start, somewhere that doesn't remind me of... She stopped, couldn't say it. Of him? Of me? Of both of us? All of it. She felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back hard. This ranch, this house, it's a memorial, Cole, to a life that ended 10 years ago, and I can't keep living in a memorial. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize it. So that's it? You're just going to sell everything and disappear? What else am I supposed to do? Stay, fight, figure out how to live instead of just survive. I've been trying to do that for 10 years. No, you haven't. You've been hiding. Same as me. We've both been hiding behind that damn promise, like it's a shield. He took another step toward her, and now there was barely a foot of space between them. But what if we stopped? Her heart was racing now. Stopped what? Hiding, pretending, using Daniel as an excuse to keep our distance. We don't. But the protest died on her lips because they both knew it was a lie. Tell me something, Cole said, his voice dropping lower. If I hadn't promised Daniel I'd look after you, if there was no obligation, no duty, no dead friend watching from wherever the dead watch from, would you still want me to stay away? The question felt like stepping onto ice, that moment of uncertainty where you don't know if it'll hold your weight or crack open beneath you. That's not fair, she whispered. Nothing about this is fair, but I'm asking anyway. She looked up at him, at this man who'd been a constant in her life for longer than Daniel had been, and felt something crack open in her chest. I don't know how to answer that. Yes, you do. Cole? Say it, Mara. For once in 10 years, just say what you mean instead of what's safe. But before she could answer, before she could figure out what the answer even was, the sound of tires on gravel made them both turn toward the window. A truck was pulling up the drive, expensive and clean in a way that marked it as not belonging to anyone who actually worked for a living. Who's that? Cole asked. Mara's stomach sank. The buyers. They said they might stop by today to look at the property one more time before closing. She watched Cole's jaw tighten, watched him step back and shove his hands in his pockets like he was physically restraining himself. I should go, he said. You don't have to. Yeah, I do. He moved toward the door but stopped with his hand on the knob, looked back at her one more time. This conversation isn't over. Cole, 2 weeks, you said. I've got 2 weeks to change your mind. You can't. Watch me. Then he was gone, the screen door banging shut behind him, and Mara stood alone in her kitchen listening to his boots on the porch steps and the sound of the buyer's truck doors opening and the wind working at the loose shingles and her own heart beating too fast in her chest. Through the window, she watched Cole nod at the buyers, a man and woman in their 50s wearing the kind of expensive outdoor gear that had never seen actual outdoor use, and climb into his own truck. He didn't look back as he drove away, but she knew he would be back. Tomorrow, probably, or the day after. He'd find some excuse. A fence that needed fixing, firewood that needed stacking, some small disaster that required his attention. Because that's what they did, had always done. They circled each other like planets locked in orbit, too close to break free, but never close enough to collide. The woman from the development company was knocking on the door now, her smile bright and professional and completely unaware that she'd just interrupted something that had been 10 years in the making. Mara smoothed her hair back, tried to wipe the last 5 minutes off her face, and went to answer the door. But as she pasted on a smile and shook hands and listened to the woman talk about renovation plans and target demographics and projected revenue, part of her mind was still in that moment before the truck pulled up, still standing too close to Cole Barrett, still trying to answer a question she'd been avoiding for a decade. Would she want him to stay away if there was no obligation? The answer, she realized with a sick twist in her stomach, was no. She wouldn't, and that truth was more terrifying than any ghost. The buyers stayed for 2 hours, walking the property with the kind of careful attention people give to something they're about to tear apart and rebuild. Mara followed them around, answering questions about the water rights and the grazing capacity and the state of the barn foundation, all while trying not to think about Cole's face when she'd asked him why he kept coming around. Because I can't stay away. The words kept circling back, landing in her mind like birds coming home to roost. When the buyers finally left, promising to be in touch with their lawyer by end of week, Mara stood on her porch and looked out at the ranch that had been her whole world since she was barely old enough to drink legally. 800 acres of scrub grass and creek bottom and rocky rise running up against the mountains in the west and bleeding into Cole's property in the north. She could see his barn from here, just a dark shape in the distance, and she wondered if he was there now, working through whatever he was feeling the way he always did, with his hands, with physical labor, with anything that didn't require him to actually talk about it. They were good at that, both of them. Good at working instead of talking, doing instead of feeling, maintaining a careful surface calm while everything underneath churned like a river in spring flood. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her lawyer. Buyers confirmed. Closing set for 2 weeks from Friday. Congratulations. Congratulations. Like selling the ranch was something to celebrate instead of something that felt like amputating a limb. She should have felt relieved. The money would set her up for life. She could buy a little house in Arizona or New Mexico, somewhere the winter didn't last forever, and the past didn't press down quite so heavy. She could start over, build something new, figure out who Mara Whitlock was when she wasn't Daniel's widow or Cole's. What? What was she to Cole? The question had been bothering her since he'd left, picking at her like a splinter she couldn't quite reach. Not his obligation, despite what they'd both been pretending for a decade. Not his duty. Not his burden. So what then? Her horse whinnied from the barn, reminding her it was past feeding time. Mara headed that way, grateful for something concrete to do with her hands. The barn was old, older than she was, built by Daniel's grandfather back when this was still open range country, and the idea of property lines was more suggestion than law. It smelled like hay and horse and old wood, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. She was halfway through measuring out grain when she heard footsteps behind her. Thought you might need help. She didn't turn around. Didn't need to. She'd know Cole's voice anywhere. Could probably pick it out of a crowd of 1,000 men, all saying the same words. I can feed my own horses, Cole. I know you can. But he didn't leave. Just stood there in the barn doorway, backlit by the late afternoon sun, and Mara felt that familiar tension start to build in her shoulders. Those the buyers I saw leaving? He asked. Yeah. They seem happy. They're getting a good deal. Of course they're happy. She finished with the grain and moved to the hay, pulling down a bale and cutting the twine with more force than necessary. Cole stepped further into the barn, close enough that she could hear him breathing. You don't have to do this, he said. We already had this conversation. No, we started it, didn't finish it, because there was nothing to finish. She threw hay into the first stall, watched her mare dig in with enthusiasm. I'm selling. You don't get a vote. End of story. What if I asked you not to? On what grounds? She turned to face him now, hay dust floating between them in the slanting light. The promise? Your duty to my dead husband? Or something else? She watched him struggle with the question, watched him open his mouth and close it again, and felt a surge of frustration so sharp it surprised her. That's what I thought, she said, turning back to the hay. Mara, don't. Please. I can't. She stopped, felt her throat close up. I can't keep doing this dance with you, Cole. I can't keep wondering what you're thinking or what you really mean or whether that look in your eyes means what I think it means. I'm too old and too tired and too... She stopped again, couldn't find the right word. To what? His voice was soft now, careful. To something. I don't know. I just know I can't stay here and keep living like this. Like what? She let out a laugh that had no humor in it. Like a widow in waiting. Like someone whose life is on pause. Like someone who's been in love with her neighbor for 10 years, but too scared to do anything about it. The words hit her like cold water, and she spun around to face him. What did you just say? Cole's face was set, determined in a way she'd never seen before. You heard me. You can't say things like that. Why not? It's true, isn't it? No, it's... But she couldn't finish the sentence because her mind had gone blank, all her careful defenses crumbling in the face of his certainty. Tell me I'm wrong, he said, taking a step toward her. Tell me you haven't thought about it, about us, about what it might be like if we stopped pretending. There is no us. Isn't there? Then what do you call this? What we've been doing for 10 years? Keeping a promise, being neighbors, I don't know, lying. That's what we've been doing. to ourselves, and to each other. He was close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. I'm done lying, Mara. I'm done pretending this is about Daniel or duty or anything other than the fact that I... He stopped himself again, and she wanted to scream with frustration. Say it, she demanded. Whatever it is, just say it. You first. What? Tell me why you're really leaving. And don't give me that line about fresh starts and new beginnings. Tell me the real reason. She stared at him, felt her heart hammering against her ribs. You want the truth? That's all I've ever wanted. Fine. The truth is I can't stay here because every time I look at you, I feel guilty. Every time you show up at my door, I feel like I'm betraying Daniel. Every time we... She gestured helplessly between them. Every time we have one of these moments, I feel like the worst person alive because part of me wants... She stopped, couldn't make herself say it. Wants what? Cole's voice was rough, urgent. I can't. Yes, you can. Cole... Say it, Mara. For once, just say it. And maybe it was the way he was looking at her. Or maybe it was 10 years of silence finally reaching critical mass. Or maybe it was just that she was so tired of running from the truth. Whatever the reason, she felt something break loose inside her chest. Part of me wants you to kiss me, she whispered. Part of me has wanted that for so long I can't remember when it started. And that makes me... She didn't get to finish because Cole was kissing her, one hand cupping her face and the other at the small of her back. And she was kissing him back without thinking, without planning, without any of the careful control she'd maintained for a decade. He tasted like coffee, and something else. Something that might have been desperation or relief, or both. And when he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. That was... She started. A mistake, he finished. I know, I shouldn't have... Don't. She put her hand on his chest, felt his heart racing under her palm. Don't apologize. Don't make excuses. Just... She stopped, trying to organize thoughts that felt like they'd been scattered by a strong wind. We can't do this. Why not? You know why. Daniel's been dead for 10 years, Mara. At some point we have to stop using him as a reason not to live. The words hit her like a physical blow, and she stepped back, putting space between them. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's the truth. He was your best friend. I know. You were with him when he died. I was there, yeah. Cole's voice had gone flat, careful. I was there when he asked me to take care of you. And I've been doing that for 10 years, but maybe... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. Maybe it's time we both admitted that's not all this is. Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I loved him, Cole. I know you did. I still love him. Part of me always will. That's not what I'm asking you to give up. Then what are you asking? He looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes serious. I'm asking if maybe there's room for something else, something new, something that doesn't erase what you had, but doesn't let it stop you from living either. And what if I can't do that? What if the guilt is too much? Then we'll figure it out. Together. The word together hung between them, bright and terrifying, and full of possibilities that Mara had spent 10 years trying not to imagine. I don't know if I can, she said quietly. Can't or won't? I don't know. Maybe there's no difference. Cole nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd been afraid of. Then I guess that's my answer. He turned to go and she felt panic surge up in her chest. Wait. He stopped, looked back at her. What if... She stopped, tried to organize the chaos of her thoughts. What if I don't leave? What? What if I cancel the sale, stay here, try to... She gestured helplessly. Try to figure this out. Would I what? Would you stay too, or would you run? The question hung between them, and she watched understanding dawn on his face. Is that what you think? He asked quietly. That I'd run. I don't know what to think anymore. He crossed back to her in 3 long strides, took her face in both hands, and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like he was trying to communicate something words couldn't quite reach. I'm not going anywhere, he said when he finally pulled back. I haven't gone anywhere in 10 years. Why would I start now? Because things are different now. Yeah, they are. And maybe that's a good thing. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could do this, build something new without destroying what came before. But the fear was still there, cold and heavy in her stomach. I need time, she said finally. To think. To figure out what I want. How much time? I don't know. More than a day. Less than forever. A smile ghosted across his face. I can work with that. Can you? Mara, I've been waiting 10 years. I think I can handle a few more days. She laughed, a small sound that came out half sob. You're being very reasonable about this. Don't worry, I'm freaking out inside. Good. That makes two of us. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to do next, and then Cole stepped back, putting careful distance between them. I should go, he said. Let you think. Yeah, probably. But he hesitated in the barn doorway, looked back at her one more time. For what it's worth, I think you should stay. Not because of me, not because of the ranch, but because running away doesn't solve anything. It just moves the problem to a new zip code. When did you get so wise? I've had 10 years to think about it. Then he was gone, and Mara was alone in the barn, with her horses and her thoughts and the ghost of his kiss still burning on her lips. She stayed there until full dark, sitting on a hay bale and trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The contract was still on her kitchen table. The buyers were expecting to close in 2 weeks. Her lawyer was probably already drawing up the final paperwork. But Cole had kissed her, and she had kissed him back. And now everything she thought she knew about her life felt like it had been written in sand and a wave had just come through and wiped it clean. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cole. Still thinking? She typed back. Yeah, take your time. I'm not going anywhere. She stared at the words on the screen, at this proof that maybe, just maybe, he meant what he said. That he wasn't going to run. That he was willing to wait while she figured out whether she was brave enough to try. The smart thing would be to stick to the plan. Sell the ranch. Leave. Start over somewhere that didn't have so much history attached to every fence post and barn beam. The smart thing would be to run before this thing with Cole had a chance to get complicated, before they had a chance to ruin a decade of careful friendship with something as messy as love. But Mara was beginning to suspect that the smart thing and the right thing weren't always the same. She looked around the barn, at the stalls Daniel had built, at the hayloft where they'd found a litter of barn cats one winter, at the old anvil his grandfather had used back when this was still frontier country. This place was soaked in memories, both good and painful, and leaving wouldn't make them disappear. Cole was right about that. It would just move them somewhere else. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Cole. Tomorrow, same time, I'll bring coffee. She smiled despite herself. Deal. Then she stood up, brushed hay off her jeans, and headed back to the house. The contract was still there, still signed, still waiting. But Mara didn't look at it as she passed. Instead, she picked up her phone and called her lawyer. I need you to do something for me, she said when he answered. Sure, what's up? Delay the closing 2 weeks, maybe 3. Mara, the buyers are expecting. I know what they're expecting, but I need more time. Tell them. She stopped, trying to think of an excuse that didn't sound like what it was. Tell them there's a problem with the water rights, or the mineral rights, something that needs investigating. Is there a problem? Maybe. I don't know yet. Her lawyer sighed. You're having second thoughts. I'm having a lot of thoughts. I just need time to sort through them. The buyers aren't going to be happy. Then they can walk. There'll be other buyers. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Okay, I'll make the call tomorrow morning. Thanks, Jim. She hung up and stood in her kitchen, looking out at the dark shape of the barn and, beyond it, the darker shape of the mountains rising against the stars. Somewhere across the field, Cole was probably doing the same thing, standing at his window, looking out at her ranch, wondering if she was brave enough to take the risk. She didn't know the answer yet, but for the first time in 10 years, she was willing to find out. Cole showed up the next morning at 6:30 with 2 cups of coffee and a careful expression that told Mara he'd spent most of the night thinking about what had happened in the barn. She met him on the porch, still in her work jeans and the flannel shirt she'd thrown on when the sun came up. The air was cold enough to see your breath, and somewhere in the distance a coyote was singing its morning song to nothing in particular. "You're early," she said, taking the coffee he offered. "Couldn't sleep." "Yeah, me neither." They stood there for a moment, not quite looking at each other, and Mara felt the awkwardness settle between them like a third person neither of them had invited. "I called my lawyer last night," she said finally. "Asked him to delay the closing." Cole's head came up fast. "You did?" "Don't get excited. I'm not making any promises. I just—" She stopped, took a sip of coffee that burned all the way down. "I need more time to think." "How much time?" "I don't know. A few weeks. Maybe more." She watched something shift in his expression, something that might have been hope or relief or both. "Okay? That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? That I'm glad you're not rushing into a decision that might be wrong? Yeah, I'm glad, but I also know pushing you won't help. Since when are you so patient?" A smile ghosted across his face. "Since never. I'm faking it." That surprised a laugh out of her, and some of the tension eased. "At least you're honest." "Trying to be. Seems like a good time to start." She nodded, looked out at the ranch land stretching away toward the mountains. The sun was coming up behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would be gone in 20 minutes. "You want to tell me the real story? About you and Daniel and how all this started?" Cole's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You sure you want to hear it?" "I think I need to. If we're going to—" She stopped, couldn't quite finish the sentence. "I need to understand what I'm dealing with here." He was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he was trying to draw warmth from it. "Okay, but not here. Let's walk." They headed out toward the old fence line that divided her property from his, their boots crunching through frost-stiff grass. The horses watched them from the pasture, curious but not concerned, and overhead a hawk circled lazy patterns against the brightening sky. "Daniel and I met in college," Cole said finally. "University of Wyoming. Both of us studying ranch management, both of us convinced we were going to revolutionize the cattle industry or some other stupid 20-year-old idea. He never talked much about college. That's because most of it was embarrassing. We were idiots, thought we knew everything, knew nothing." He took a drink of coffee. "But we became friends, good friends, the kind where you can't really remember a time before the person was in your life." Mara knew the feeling. She'd felt that way about Daniel once, back when everything was new and the future felt like something bright you could hold in your hands. "After graduation, we both wanted to ranch, but neither of us had the money to buy land," Cole continued. "So we made a plan. We'd work for other people, save everything we could, and in 5 years we'd pool our resources and buy a place together. Split it down the middle. 2 ranches, neighbors for life." "That actually happened?" "Most of it. Took us 7 years instead of 5, and we had to take out loans that scared the hell out of both of us, but yeah. We found this place, 1,600 acres, going cheap because the previous owner had run it into the ground. We bought it, split it, and started building." They'd reached the fence line now. Cole leaned against a post that he'd probably replaced at some point in the last decade and stared out at the land like he was seeing it through different eyes. "Year 3, Daniel met you." "At the hardware store in town," Mara said, remembering. "I was buying fence staples, and he told me I was getting the wrong kind." "Sounds like him. Always had an opinion about the right way to do things. He asked me to dinner that same day, married me 6 months later." 9 months, Cole corrected. "But yeah, fast." There was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. "You didn't approve?" "Wasn't about approving. Daniel was happy. You were happy. That's what mattered." "But?" He took a long time answering. "But I thought he was rushing it. Thought maybe you both needed more time to figure out if you were right for each other. Not because there was anything wrong with you," he added quickly. "Just because—" He stopped, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "Because I'd known Daniel his whole adult life, and I'd never seen him make a decision that fast about anything. It worried me." "You thought I was a mistake?" "No, I thought the speed was a mistake. There's a difference." He looked at her then, his gray eyes serious. "I was wrong, for what it's worth. You two were good together. He loved you, really loved you, and you made him—" He stopped, shook his head. You made him better, calmer, like he finally had something to work toward that wasn't just ambition. Mara felt her throat tighten. He loved this place, the ranch, building something that would last. He did. We both did. We used to talk about it all the time, about how our kids would grow up together, run these places when we were too old to do it ourselves. He had all these plans, all these ideas about legacy and permanence, and Cole stopped, his hands tightening on the fence post. And then he got sick. The silence that followed had weight. Mara remembered that time with a clarity that hurt. The way Daniel had brushed off the fatigue at first, blamed it on hard work and late nights. The way he'd finally gone to the doctor when he could barely get out of bed. The diagnosis that had come down like a hammer. Aggressive lymphoma, stage 4, prognosis poor. 6 months, she said quietly. That's all we got. 6 months from diagnosis to... She couldn't finish. I was there, Cole said, his voice rough. At the hospital, the night he died. I remember. You sat with me in the waiting room after. Didn't say anything. Just sat there. Didn't know what to say. Still don't, most of the time. She looked at him standing there in the early morning light, this man who'd been a constant in the background of her marriage and the foreground of her widowhood, and felt something shift in her understanding. Tell me about the promise, she said. Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. He asked to talk to me alone, day before he died. You'd gone home to shower and change, and he stopped, took a breath. He knew he was dying, could feel it, I think, and he was scared. Of dying. Of leaving you alone. Of you having to run this place by yourself. Of you being... He stopped again. He made me promise I'd look after you, make sure you were okay, help with the ranch, be there if you needed anything. That's all? That's all, he said out loud. Cole turned to face her fully now, but I knew what he meant. He meant don't let her sell, don't let her give up, don't let her turn into one of those people who stops living just because life got hard. And you took that seriously. Of course I did. He was my best friend and he was dying. What was I supposed to do? Tell him no? You could have just... She stopped, trying to find the right words. You could have checked in once a month, made sure I wasn't dead, called it good. That's not what he asked for. He didn't ask for 10 years of daily visits either. Cole looked away, back out at the land. No, he didn't. So why did you do it? You know why. I want to hear you say it. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, finally, because by the time he died, He stopped, started again. The promise gave me an excuse to be around you, to see you, to make sure you were okay. And at first that's all it was. Duty. Honoring my friend's last request, but somewhere along the way it became, what? Necessary. Like breathing. I'd wake up in the morning and think about what needed doing on your place before I even thought about my own. I'd see your lights on at night and know you were okay, and that would let me sleep. And I knew it was wrong, knew I was using Daniel's death as an excuse to... He stopped again, his hands curling into fists. To be close to someone I had no right to want. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and more painful than Mara had expected. When did it start? She asked quietly. The wanting. Cole let out a breath that might have been a laugh. You really want to know? Yeah, I do. Your wedding day. The words hit her like a slap, and she actually took a step back. What? I was Daniel's best man, stood up there next to him while he married you and thought... He stopped, shook his head like he was disgusted with himself. Thought I was the biggest bastard alive for wishing it was me instead. Cole, let me finish, please. I need to... He took a breath. I need to say this out loud or I never will. She nodded, throat too tight to speak. I told myself it was just wedding day jitters on my part, that I was jealous because my best friend had found someone and I was still alone, that it would pass. And for a while I thought maybe it had. You and Daniel seemed happy. I kept my distance, focused on my own place, tried to... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. Tried to be a good friend instead of a jealous asshole. You were a good friend. Daniel said so all the time. Yeah, well, Daniel didn't know the truth. Which was... That every time I came over for dinner or helped with some ranch project, I was memorizing the way you laughed, the way you moved, the way you'd get this little crease between your eyebrows when you were concentrating on something. He looked at her then, and the pain in his eyes was almost more than she could stand. I was in love with my best friend's wife, and I hated myself for it. Mara felt tears burning hot behind her eyes. Why didn't you say something? What was I supposed to say? Hey, Daniel, I know you just married the love of your life, but I want her too. That's not... He stopped, shook his head. That's not something you do to a friend. So you just suffered in silence. What else was I going to do? Leave? Find somewhere else to live? That would have hurt Daniel more than keeping my mouth shut. At least this way I could still... He stopped again, and she watched him struggle with the words. At least this way I could still be near you, even if I couldn't have you. That must have been hell. It was. And then he got sick, and suddenly there were bigger problems than my inconvenient feelings. He needed me. You needed me. So I showed up, did what needed doing, tried not to think about what would happen after. And then he died. And then he died, and I had the promise, and suddenly I had a reason to keep showing up that didn't make me feel like the worst person alive. He turned to look at her fully. You want to know the truth, the real truth? That promise was a gift. It gave me permission to be in your life, to help you, to see you every day without having to explain why I couldn't stay away. But you were staying away, Mara said, in the ways that mattered. You never... She stopped, felt her face heating. You never touched me, never even hinted that you might want to. Because that would have been crossing a line. What line? Daniel was dead. I wasn't his wife anymore. But you were grieving. And I was his best friend. And taking advantage of that seemed... He stopped, jaw tight. Seemed like something I couldn't come back from. So instead you just... What? Tortured yourself for a decade? Seemed like the right thing to do. It was stupid. Probably. But it's what I chose. They stood there in the cold morning air, the fence line between them both literal and metaphorical, and Mara felt like she was seeing the last 10 years through new eyes. All those visits she'd thought were duty, all those repairs she'd assumed were guilt, all those moments of standing too close or looking too long that she'd convinced herself she was imagining, they'd all been real. They'd all meant something. I thought I was crazy, she said finally. Thought I was reading things into nothing because I was lonely and you were there and... She stopped, couldn't quite finish. And what? And because I wanted you too. The words came out barely louder than a whisper. Not at first. At first you were just Daniel's friend, this guy who showed up to help and never asked for anything in return. But somewhere along the way you became... She stopped, tried to find the right words. You became the person I looked for first when something went wrong. The person I wanted to tell when something went right. The person whose opinion mattered more than it should. When? His voice was rough. When did it start for you? She thought about it, tried to pin down the moment when Cole Barrett had shifted from friend to something more dangerous. Year 3, I think, maybe 4. You came over to help me fix the barn roof after that big storm, and you... She stopped, felt her face heat. You took your shirt off because it was hot, and I saw this scar on your shoulder, asked you about it. Broke my collarbone in high school, fell off a horse during a rodeo. You told me the story, made it funny, and I remember thinking... She stopped, shook her head, thinking that I liked the way you told stories, liked your voice, liked the way you didn't make a big deal out of pain. That's it? That's when you knew? No, that's when I started noticing. The knowing came later, maybe year 6. You brought over firewood in the middle of winter without me asking, and I realized you'd been doing that every year since Daniel died, that you paid attention, that you remembered things. Like what? Like how much wood I needed, how often I ran out, what time of day I usually started the fire. She looked at him. You knew my schedule better than I did. I was paying attention. Why? Because I couldn't help it. Because every detail about you mattered more than it should. He took a step toward her and then stopped, like he'd hit an invisible wall. You want to know what I remember? I remember that you drink your coffee black in the morning, but with cream after noon. I remember that you hate the color yellow, but you wear it anyway because Daniel bought you that yellow shirt for your birthday, and you can't bring yourself to throw it out. I remember that you bite your lower lip when you're thinking hard about something and that you hum old country songs under your breath when you don't think anyone can hear. Mara felt her breath catch. That's creepy. I know. I told you I was a mess. I was going to say observant. Same thing in this case. She took a step toward him, closing some of the distance. I noticed things too, like how you always knock twice, even though you could just walk in. Like how you check the weather before you come over so you know what kind of help I might need that day. Like how you've never once asked me for anything in return. That's not true. What have you ever asked me for? He looked at her for a long moment, something desperate flickering behind his eyes. To stay. I'm asking now. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. Cole, I know I don't have the right. I know this is complicated and messy, and probably a disaster waiting to happen. But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Give this place another chance. Give us... He stopped, corrected himself. Give yourself another chance to figure out what you want without running away first. And what if what I want is to leave? What if staying here just makes everything harder? Then I'll help you pack. I'll help you load the truck. Hell, I'll drive you wherever you want to go. But at least you'll be leaving because you want to, not because you're scared. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. Same as me. We're both scared to death that if we try this and it doesn't work, we'll lose everything. The friendship, the history, the comfort of knowing someone gives a damn whether we make it through the winter. He took another step toward her, and now there was less than a foot between them. But what if we don't try and spend the rest of our lives wondering what if? That scares me more. Mara looked up at him, at this man who'd been loving her in secret for a decade, and felt something crack open in her chest. I don't know how to do this. How to be... She stopped, gestured helplessly between them. How to be whatever this is without feeling guilty. We'll figure it out. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and we haven't even started yet. He reached out slowly, like he was approaching a spooked horse, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But I'd rather do hard things with you than easy things with anyone else. That's... She stopped, felt tears burning hot in her eyes. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and I don't know what to do with it. You don't have to do anything, not right now. Just think about it. Think about staying. Think about what it might be like if we stopped hiding. And if I can't, if the guilt is too much, then we'll deal with that too. But at least we'll know we tried. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could build something new without destroying what came before. But the fear was still there, cold and insistent in her stomach. I need to think, she said finally. Okay. Alone. Without you standing here looking at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something precious you're afraid to break. A smile ghosted across his face. Can't help it. That's how I've always looked at you. Well, stop it. It's distracting. Yes, ma'am. But he didn't move, just stood there with his hand still hovering near her face, and Mara felt the pull of him like gravity. Cole, I'm going. I promise. Just... He stopped, his thumb brushing her cheekbone so lightly she might have imagined it. Just know that whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere. The promise might have brought me here, but it's not what keeps me coming back. That's all you. Then he was walking away, heading back toward his truck, and Mara stood alone at the fence line watching him go and trying to remember how to breathe. She spent the rest of the day working herself half to death, trying to outrun the chaos in her head. She fixed the loose board on the barn door that had been bothering her for months, cleaned out the gutters, reorganized the tack room, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from circling back to Cole's confession. I was in love with my best friend's wife. The words kept repeating, landing in her mind like stones in still water, each one sending out ripples that touched everything she thought she knew about the last 10 years. Had Daniel known? Had he suspected? She tried to remember any sign, any moment of tension between the two men, but came up empty. They'd been close right up until the end, laughing together, planning together, building a future that Daniel wouldn't live to see. The guilt hit her then, sharp and unexpected. Because part of her was glad Cole had told her, part of her had been wanting to hear it for longer than she could admit, and that made her feel like she was betraying Daniel all over again, like his death had been some kind of convenient opening instead of the worst thing that had ever happened to her. She was halfway through mucking out the stalls when she heard tires on gravel. For a second her heart jumped, thinking it was Cole come back, but the engine sound was wrong, too smooth, too new, the buyers. Mara swore under her breath, dropped the pitchfork, and headed out to meet them. The same couple from yesterday climbed out of their expensive SUV, all smiles and designer outdoor gear. "Hope we're not interrupting," the woman said. Her name was Patricia, or Pamela, or something else that started with P. "We were just driving by and thought we'd stop in to discuss the timeline." "I thought my lawyer called you," Mara said, not bothering to hide her irritation. "The closing's been delayed." The woman's smile faltered. "Yes, he mentioned something about water rights issues?" "Something like that. But surely those can be resolved quickly. We're on a tight schedule with our investors and—" "Look," Mara cut her off, too tired and too emotionally wrung out to be polite. "I don't know when those issues will be resolved. Could be next week. Could be next month. Could be never. If that's a problem, you're welcome to walk away from the deal." The man stepped forward, his own smile more practiced than his wife's. "Mrs. Whitlock, I understand you might be having some natural hesitation about selling your family home, but I assure you, this isn't hesitation. This is me telling you the truth. The closing is delayed. If you can't handle that, find another property." "There are legal ramifications to backing out of a signed contract," the man said, his smile gone now. "Then sue me. You'll join a long line of people I've disappointed." She turned and walked back toward the barn, leaving them standing in her driveway looking confused and more than a little angry. She heard their car doors slam, heard the engine start, heard them drive away. And she felt nothing. No regret, no fear, just a kind of tired relief that they were gone. Her phone rang an hour later. Her lawyer. "Mara, what the hell did you say to the buyers?" "The truth. That I might not sell. They're threatening to sue for breach of contract." "Let them try. The contract had contingencies. I'm exercising them. This isn't like you." "Maybe it should be." She took a breath. "Jim, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Find out what it would take to back out of the sale completely. Clean. No lawsuits. No complications." There was a long pause on the other end. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack." "Mara, that money could set you up for life." "I know. And you're willing to walk away from it?" "I'm willing to consider walking away from it. There's a difference." Another pause. "This have anything to do with Cole Barrett?" "What makes you say that?" "Because I've got eyes. Half the town's been waiting for you two to figure out what everyone else already knows." That surprised her. "Which is?" "That you're either going to kill each other or end up together. Smart money's on the second one." Mara let out a laugh that had no humor in it. Nothing like living in a small town where everyone knows your business. Comes with the territory. "So what do you want me to do?" "Find me an out. A clean one. And Jim, don't tell anyone about this. Not yet. Your secret's safe with me." She hung up and stood in her kitchen looking out at the ranch land that had been her whole world for half her adult life. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that would be gone in minutes. Somewhere across the field, Cole was probably finishing his own evening chores, probably thinking about the same things she was. Her phone buzzed. A text from him. "You okay?" She typed back. "Buyers showed up. Might have told them to sue me." His response came fast. "Good. They were assholes anyway." She smiled despite herself. "How do you know? Saw them drive past. Anyone who wears that much North Face to look at a working ranch is automatically an asshole. That's judgy. I'm a judgy person. You should know this about me. I'm learning all sorts of things about you lately." There was a pause before his next text. "Good things or bad things?" She stared at the question, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Complicated things." "Fair enough." "You still thinking?" "Yeah." "Good. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The same words he'd said before, like a promise or a threat or both. Mara set her phone down and made herself dinner she didn't eat. Took a shower that didn't wash away the confusion. Went to bed and stared at the ceiling for hours while her mind circled the same impossible question over and over. What did she want? Not what was safe, not what was smart, not what would honor Daniel's memory or preserve the promise or make the town stop talking. What did she actually want? The answer, when it finally came in the dark hours before dawn, was so simple it hurt. She wanted to stay. She wanted to keep this ranch, keep this life, keep this place that had shaped her and scarred her and made her who she was. And she wanted Cole Barrett in it, not as a neighbor doing his duty, but as something more, something real, something that didn't have to hide behind excuses and promises and 10 years of careful silence. But wanting it and being brave enough to take it were two different things. The sun was barely up when Mara heard Cole's truck in the driveway. She'd been awake for hours, sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee and a head full of static, trying to work up the courage to do what she knew she needed to do. She met him at the door before he could knock. "We need to talk," she said. He stopped mid-reach, hand halfway to the doorframe. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. Maybe. I don't know." She stepped back to let him in. "I've been thinking." I gathered that much. He came inside, bringing the smell of early morning and wood smoke with him. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't. Not really." "Mara, let me say this before I lose my nerve." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the heat coming from the wood stove. "I'm not selling the ranch." Something shifted in his expression. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She took a breath. "I called Jim this morning, told him to kill the deal. Whatever it takes." "What about the buyers?" "They can find another property to ruin." She managed a weak smile. "Turns out I'm more attached to this place than I thought." Cole took a step toward her and then stopped, like he was afraid one wrong move might spook her. "That's good. That's—" He stopped, shook his head. "That's really good, Mara. Don't celebrate yet. I'm still figuring things out." "What kind of things?" She looked at him standing in her kitchen, this man who'd been orbiting her life for a decade, and felt her pulse kick up. "Us things. If there even is an us. If there can be. There can be whatever you want there to be. That's the problem. I don't know what I want. Or maybe I do and I'm just too scared to—" She stopped, forced herself to keep going. "I need to know something first." "Okay. Did Daniel know about how you felt?" The question landed heavy between them, and she watched Cole's face close down, walls going up so fast she almost missed it. "I don't—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I don't think so. I was careful." "But you're not sure." "No, I'm not sure." He looked away, jaw tight. He never said anything, never gave any sign that he suspected, but sometimes I'd catch him looking at me weird and I'd wonder if maybe— He stopped, shook his head. "I don't know, Mara. I really don't." Would it have mattered if he'd known? Of course it would have mattered. He was my best friend. That's not what I'm asking. She took a step toward him. "I'm asking if it would have changed anything, if you would have left, stayed away." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on something past her shoulder. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." He brought his gaze back to her face. "But he didn't know, so it doesn't matter. It matters to me. Because if we're going to—" She stopped, couldn't quite finish the thought. "If we're going to try this, whatever this is, I need to know I'm not—" She stopped again, felt her throat close up. "Not what?" "Not betraying him. Not turning his death into some kind of convenient opportunity. You're not doing that." "How do you know?" "Because I know you. Because I've watched you grieve him for 10 years, and it never looked convenient. It looked hard and lonely and like something you'd give anything to undo." He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could see the fine lines around his eyes. "You loved him, really loved him. That doesn't stop being true just because you might have room for something else now. But what if I didn't love him enough? What if part of me was already—" She stopped, couldn't say it. "Already what?" "Already looking at you. Already wondering." The confession came out barely louder than a whisper. "Year 6, I told you, but maybe it was earlier. Maybe it was always there and I just didn't want to see it. And that makes you a bad person, doesn't it?" "No, it makes you human." He reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he took her hand. You want to know what I think Daniel would say if he was here? I'm not sure I do. I think he'd tell you to stop beating yourself up over things you can't control. I think he'd tell you that life is short and you've spent enough time being sad. And I think... He stopped, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I think he'd want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't look the way either of you planned. Mara felt tears burning hot behind her eyes. You sound very sure about that. I knew him for 20 years. I'm as sure as I can be. But you can't know, not really. None of us can. No, we can't. But we can make choices based on what we think is true and hope we're right. He squeezed her hand gently. What do you think is true, Mara? She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers dwarfed hers, and felt something settle in her chest. I think he loved me. I think he'd want me to be okay, and I think... She stopped, made herself say it. I think maybe he knew you'd take care of me better than anyone else could. Maybe that's why he asked. You think he was playing matchmaker from his deathbed? I think he knew what kind of man you were, what kind of friend, what kind of... She stopped, couldn't finish. What? What kind of person would put me first even when it cost you everything? Cole's hand tightened on hers. It didn't cost me everything. Didn't it? 10 years, Cole. 10 years of wanting something you couldn't have. That's not nothing. It also wasn't nothing. Those 10 years, being here, seeing you. That mattered too. Even when it hurt? Especially when it hurt, because at least it meant I was feeling something. He pulled her closer, slow enough that she could stop him if she wanted. I spent my 20s feeling nothing, working myself to death on other people's ranches and not caring about much of anything except the next paycheck. And then I met Daniel, and we built this place, and suddenly I had something to care about. And then I met you, and... He stopped, shook his head, and everything got more complicated and more painful and more real all at once. That's a hell of a confession. You asked for the truth. That's what truth looks like. She looked up at him, at this man who'd been carrying a torch for her since before she even knew his last name, and felt something crack open in her chest. I'm scared. Of what? Of messing this up? Of disrespecting Daniel's memory? Of the whole town talking about us like we've been waiting for him to die so we could... She stopped, couldn't finish. So we could what? Be happy? Live our lives? That's not something to be ashamed of. No, tell that to Betty Morrison at the feed store. Tell that to half the people in town who've been watching us for years. I don't give a damn what Betty Morrison thinks, and I don't give a damn what the town thinks either. That's easy for you to say. You're not the widow who moved on too fast. Too fast? Mara, it's been 10 years. It doesn't matter. People will talk. They'll say we were carrying on behind his back. They'll make it dirty. Let them. His voice was rough, urgent. Let them say whatever they want. We know the truth. That's all that matters. Is it? Because the truth feels pretty messy from where I'm standing. Life is messy. Love is messy. None of it comes clean and simple like in the movies. He pulled her closer still until there was barely any space between them. But I'd rather have messy and real with you than clean and empty with anyone else. You keep saying things like that. Like what? Like you've been practicing them. Like you've had 10 years to figure out exactly what to say. A smile ghosted across his face. Maybe I have. Is it working? I don't know. Maybe. She felt tears burning behind her eyes again. I just need to know that this is real. That it's not just... She stopped, trying to find the right words. That it's not just convenience or loneliness or unfinished business from when Daniel was alive. You want to know if I'm in love with you or in love with the idea of you? Yeah, I guess I do. He was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes searching her face. I know you take your coffee black in the morning. I know you hate doing paperwork, and you'll put it off until the last possible second. I know you sing off key in the shower, and you think nobody can hear but your bathroom window faces my barn, and sometimes I stop what I'm doing just to listen. He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. I know you're scared of thunder even though you'll never admit it. I know you sleep on the left side of the bed, and you keep a photo of Daniel on the nightstand, and sometimes you talk to it when you think you're alone. Mara felt her breath catch. You know all that? I know more than that. I know you're stubborn and proud and you'd rather break than ask for help. I know you work yourself half to death when you're upset because it's easier than feeling things. I know you're afraid of being weak and being forgotten and being the kind of person who gives up. He cupped her face in both hands now, gentle but sure. And I know that even with all of that, even with all your sharp edges and defense mechanisms and walls, you're the strongest person I've ever met. And I'm in love with you. Not the idea of you. You. The words hung between them, raw and honest and more than she'd expected. That's... She stopped, couldn't find words adequate to the moment. That's a lot. Too much? Maybe. I don't know. She put her hands on his chest, felt his heart beating fast under her palms. What if I can't be what you need? What if I'm too broken or too stuck or too... Stop. He said it gently but firmly. Stop making excuses. Stop hiding behind what ifs and maybes. Just tell me the truth. Do you want this or not? The question was simple. The answer should have been too. But Mara felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on her shoulders, all those careful silences and swallowed words and moments of standing too close without ever crossing the line. I want it, she whispered. I'm terrified and I don't know if it's right, and I'm probably going to mess it up. But I want it. Something shifted in Cole's expression, something that looked like relief mixed with disbelief. Say that again. I want this. You, us, whatever we are. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He kissed her then. Not gentle this time, but desperate, like he was trying to make up for 10 years of not kissing her all at once. And Mara kissed him back with the same urgency, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. We should probably talk about this, Cole said, his forehead resting against hers. Figure out what this means, what we're doing. Later. She pulled him back down. We'll talk later. Mara, 10 years, Cole. We've been talking for 10 years. I'm done talking. She kissed him again, and this time he didn't argue, just wrapped his arms around her and held on like she might disappear if he let go. And maybe she would have, if this had happened a week ago or a month ago or even yesterday. But right now, in this moment, with the morning sun coming through the kitchen window and 10 years of silence finally broken, Mara felt more solid than she had in a decade. They ended up on the couch, a tangle of limbs and racing hearts and whispered words that didn't quite make sense but didn't need to. Cole's hands were careful at first, like he was still afraid of breaking something, but Mara pulled him closer, showed him with touch what she couldn't quite say with words. It was messy and awkward and nothing like the movies, both of them fumbling with buttons and bumping elbows and laughing at the absurdity of it. But it was also real and honest, and more right than anything Mara had felt in years. Afterwards, they lay tangled together on the too small couch, not talking, just breathing in sync and trying to make sense of what had just happened. We should probably... Cole started. Don't. Mara pressed her face against his shoulder. Don't ruin it by overthinking. I was going to say we should probably move to a bed next time. This couch is murder on my back. That surprised a laugh out of her. You're 42, not 80. Tell that to my spine. She smiled against his skin, felt something warm unfold in her chest. Next time, huh? Unless you're planning on this being a one-time thing. Are you? Hell no. I've waited 10 years for this. I'm not letting you go now. The words should have scared her, should have sent her running back behind all her careful walls. But instead, they just made her hold on tighter. What are we doing, Cole? I think that's pretty obvious. No, I mean... She stopped, tried to organize thoughts that felt scattered like leaves in wind. What happens now? Do we tell people? Do we keep it quiet? Do we take it one day at a time? We don't rush. We don't hide. We just... He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. We just be together and figure the rest out as we go. That's not much of a plan. You have a better one? She thought about it, about all the ways this could go wrong, all the judgment and gossip and complications waiting just around the corner. No, I guess I don't. Then let's go with mine. They stayed like that for a while longer, wrapped up in each other and the quiet morning, until the sound of tires on gravel made them both freeze. You expecting someone? Cole asked. No. Mara sat up, reaching for her shirt. You? Not unless my cows learn to drive. They dressed quickly, not quite looking at each other, and Mara felt a flush creep up her neck that had nothing to do with the temperature. Through the window, she could see a familiar truck pulling up, Frank Patterson, who owned the ranch to the south and had never learned the meaning of boundaries. Wonderful, she muttered. Just what we need. Cole was tucking his shirt in, his hair still messed up in a way that would probably tell Frank everything he needed to know. Want me to get rid of him? No, I'll handle it. She finger-combed her own hair, trying to look like she hadn't just been rolling around on the couch with her neighbor. You should probably leave? Yeah, probably. But he didn't move, just stood there looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. This doesn't change anything, right, between us? What do you mean? I mean, we're not going back to pretending. Not now. No, we're not. She crossed to him, went up on her toes to kiss him quick and sure. We're not pretending anymore. He smiled against her mouth. Good, because I'm really bad at it anyway. Frank was knocking on the door now, his signature 3 sharp raps that always sounded vaguely accusatory. I'll call you later, Mara said. You better. Cole slipped out the back door just as she answered the front, and if Frank noticed anything unusual, he was smart enough not to mention it. But Mara saw the way his eyes tracked Cole's truck pulling away, saw the calculation happening behind his weathered face. Morning, Mara, Frank said, hat in hand. Got a minute? Sure. What's up? Heard you might be selling. Wanted to talk to you about maybe buying some of your water rights before you finalize anything with those Denver people. Of course he had. Small-town gossip moved faster than wildfire and was twice as hard to contain. I'm not selling, Mara said. Frank's eyebrows went up. That's so. Because Jerry at the title company said, Jerry at the title company needs to learn to keep his mouth shut. She kept her voice level with effort. The deal fell through. I'm keeping the ranch. Well now. Frank rocked back on his heels, looking pleased. That's good news, real good news. Place like this should stay in the family. I'm not family anymore, Frank. Daniel's been gone 10 years. You're still a Whitlock in my book. And this ranch, he gestured out at the land. This ranch is part of the community. Would have been a shame to see it turned into some fancy resort. Yeah, it would have. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing in particular, water levels and cattle prices and the weather forecast, and the whole time Mara could feel Frank's eyes on her, watching, calculating, trying to figure out what had changed. When he finally left, she closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Because this was it. This was what she'd signed up for when she'd kissed Cole Barrett in her kitchen. The scrutiny, the judgment, the whole town watching and waiting to see what would happen next. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cole. You okay? She typed back, Frank stopped by. I think he knows. Knows what? About us. About something. He had that look. What look? The one that says he's already composing the story he's going to tell at the feed store tomorrow. There was a pause before Cole's next text. Does it matter? Mara stared at the question, felt something settle in her chest. No, I guess it doesn't. Good. Come over for dinner tonight. Is that code for something? It's code for I want to see you and I don't want to wait until tomorrow. Bossy. You haven't seen Bossy yet. She smiled despite herself, felt something warm and bright unfurl in her chest. What time? 6. I'll cook. You can cook? I can heat things up. There's a difference. See you at 6. She spent the rest of the day in a kind of daze, moving through her chores on autopilot while her mind replayed the morning over and over. Cole's hands on her skin, his mouth on hers. The way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and breakable and worth the wait. It felt impossible. It felt inevitable. It felt like something that had been building for so long that now that it had finally broken through, she couldn't remember what it felt like to hold it back. At 5:30, she showered and changed into clean jeans, and the blue shirt Cole had once said brought out her eyes, even though she'd pretended not to hear the compliment at the time. At 5:45, she was standing in front of her mirror trying to decide if she looked like she was trying too hard. At 5:50, she gave up and drove over to Cole's place. His ranch looked like hers in a lot of ways. Same weathered barn, same practical house, same sense of land worked hard and well. But there were differences too. Cole's fences were straighter. His driveway was graded better. His whole operation had a precision to it that spoke to the kind of person he was. Methodical, careful. Someone who didn't leave loose ends. He met her at the door wearing a clean shirt and an expression that made her stomach flip. "You're early," he said. "You said 6. It's 5:50. Close enough." She stepped past him into the house, taking in details she'd never paid attention to before. The kitchen was clean but lived in, dishes drying in the rack, coffee pot still half full from the morning. The living room was sparse, couch, chair, TV that looked like it hadn't been turned on in months. No photos on the walls, no personal touches, like he'd been living here for years without ever quite moving in. "Nice place," she said. "It's a house." That's one way to describe it. He smiled, closed the distance between them. "I know it's not much. I don't spend a lot of time inside." "Because you're always at my place fixing my fences." "That's one reason." "What are the others?" "This place is empty. Yours isn't." The confession landed soft between them, and Mara felt her chest tighten. "Cole, I know. Too much too fast. I'm working on the filter." He kissed her before she could respond, slow and sweet, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. "But I'm not apologizing for it. I didn't ask you to." "Good, because I won't." They ate dinner at his kitchen table, pasta that was only slightly overcooked and salad from a bag, and talked about nothing in particular. Ranch business, weather patterns, the neighbor's dog that kept getting loose, safe topics that didn't require them to address the elephant in the room. Finally, over coffee that was somehow worse than hers, Mara couldn't take it anymore. "We need to talk about this," she said. "I thought you were done talking." "I was, this morning, but now it's evening, and I've had time to think, and—" She stopped, tried to organize the chaos in her head. "We need ground rules or something. Boundaries." "Okay, like what?" "Like—" She stopped, realized she didn't actually know. "Like how fast we take this, how public we make it, what we tell people." "We tell them the truth." "Which is what exactly?" Cole set his coffee down, his gray eyes serious. "That we've been friends for 10 years and something changed and now we're seeing where it goes. That's the sanitized version. You want the unsanitized one? Maybe. The unsanitized version is that I've been in love with you since the day you married my best friend, and you've been feeling something similar for longer than you want to admit, and we finally stopped lying about it." He reached across the table, took her hand. "That work better? That'll get us run out of town. Then we'll move. Buy a place somewhere people don't care about our history." "You'd do that? Leave here? For you? Yeah, I would." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Cole, but I don't think we'll have to. I think people will talk for a while, and then they'll find something else to talk about, and we'll just be Mara and Cole instead of Daniel's widow and his best friend." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. We're just making it complicated." "Everything about this is complicated. Only if we let it be." He squeezed her hand. "Look, I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm not saying people won't judge or gossip or make it harder than it needs to be. But I'm saying I don't care. And I need to know if you care. Because if you do, if the town's opinion matters more than this, then we should stop now before what? Before I fall any harder than I already have." The confession hung between them, and Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You're going to break my heart, aren't you?" "I hope not. That's kind of the opposite of the plan." "What is the plan?" "Love you, take care of you, build something that lasts." He said it like it was simple, like those 3 things didn't contain entire universes of complexity. "That's all I've got." "That's enough." The words came out before she could stop them, true and terrifying all at once. "That's more than enough." They ended up in his bed this time, taking their time, learning each other in ways that felt both new and inevitable. And afterwards, tangled in sheets that smelled like him, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace, not perfect, not without complications, but real and solid and worth fighting for. "Stay tonight," Cole said, his voice rough with sleep. "Don't drive home in the dark." People will talk if my truck is here in the morning. Let them talk. Cole, stay, Mara. Please. I've spent 10 years watching you drive away. Just once I'd like to wake up with you still here. The request was so simple and so honest that she couldn't refuse. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. And wrapped in his arms, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, Mara finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Morning came too fast and too bright, sunlight streaming through Cole's bedroom window in a way that made Mara wonder if he'd ever heard of curtains. She woke to find him already up, standing by the window with a coffee cup in hand, looking out at his land with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're staring, she said, voice still rough with sleep. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face made her stomach flip. Can't help it. Still not convinced you're real. I'm real. Unfortunately wide awake now, but real. Coffee's on the counter. Fair warning, it's terrible. All your coffee is terrible. I'm starting to think you do it on purpose. Maybe I just want you to keep coming back to show me how to do it right. She got up, pulled on his shirt from the night before because it was closer than hers, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The coffee was, as promised, terrible. She drank it anyway. Cole came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pressed a kiss to her shoulder. We should probably talk about what happens next. Do we have to? Eventually, but not right this second. She turned in his arms, looked up at him. My truck's been here all night. That means at least 3 people saw it by now, and the whole town will know by noon. Probably. You don't sound worried. I'm not. Are you? She thought about it, about Frank Patterson's calculating eyes, and Betty Morrison's sharp tongue, and all the other people who'd been watching them for years waiting for exactly this. I'm something. Not sure worried is the right word. What word would be right? Exposed, maybe. Like we just opened a door that's going to let in a lot of noise. We can close it again if you want. I'll drive you home right now. We'll go back to being neighbors who fix each other's fences and pretend that's all this is. Could we? Really go back? He was quiet for a moment, his hand steady on her waist. No, probably not. But I'd try if that's what you needed. It's not. She said it fast before fear could make her take it back. I don't want to go back. She stopped, tried to find words for the tangle in her chest. I need to do something first, before this goes any further. What? I need to go to the cemetery, talk to Daniel. Cole's expression didn't change, but she felt something shift in the way he was holding her. You want me to come with you? No, I need to do this alone. Okay. You're not going to argue? Why would I argue? He was your husband. You need to... He stopped, seemed to be choosing words carefully. You need to make your peace with this. I get that. She kissed him then, grateful and relieved and a little bit scared of how well he understood. I should go, before the whole town drives past counting how many hours my truck was here. Let them count. I'm not ashamed of you being here. I know, but I still need to go. She dressed quickly, kissed him goodbye at the door, and drove home as the sun was climbing higher in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Her ranch looked the same as always, but somehow different too, like she was seeing it through new eyes. The barn Daniel built, the fence line he'd walked 1,000 times, the porch where they'd sat on summer evenings planning a future that never came. She fed her horses, showered, changed into clean clothes that didn't smell like Cole's soap, and then she got back in her truck and drove to the small cemetery on the edge of town where Daniel had been buried for 10 years. It wasn't a big place. Maybe 50 graves, most of them old, the headstones weathered and leaning like tired sentries. Daniel's was in the newer section, the marble still white and clean, the grass around it trimmed neat by whoever the town paid to maintain the place. Mara sat down on the ground in front of the headstone, not caring about the damp seeping through her jeans, and stared at her husband's name carved in stone. Daniel James Whitlock, beloved husband and friend, too soon gone. She'd picked those words herself, numb with grief and not sure what else to say. They seemed inadequate now, too simple for a man who'd been complicated and flawed and trying his best. I don't know how to do this, she said out loud, feeling foolish but doing it anyway. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Sorry? Thank you? Some combination of both? The wind moved through the trees overhead, the only answer she was going to get. I'm not selling the ranch. I thought you should know. I almost did. Got all the way to signing the papers and then she stopped, picked at the grass next to his headstone. Then Cole showed up and made me see I was running from the wrong things. Saying his name out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. We're together now, me and Cole. And I know that probably sounds, I don't know what it sounds like, wrong maybe, disrespectful, like I was just waiting for you to be gone so I could. She stopped, felt tears burning hot behind her eyes. But that's not how it was. I loved you, Daniel. I really did. You were good to me. You made me laugh, and you built me a home, and you tried to give me a future even when you knew you wouldn't be in it. The tears came then, hot and fast. 10 years of grief she'd kept carefully contained finally spilling over. I miss you. I still miss you. And I feel guilty as hell for being happy with Cole because part of me thinks I should still be mourning you, should still be wearing black and crying into my pillow and acting like my life ended when yours did. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. But I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so damn tired of being sad. And Cole. She stopped, had to take a breath before she could continue. Cole makes me feel like maybe I don't have to be sad forever, like maybe there's room for something new without erasing what we had. She sat there for a long time, not talking, just being present with her grief and her guilt and the truth she'd been running from for a decade. He loved you, Cole. He really did. You were his best friend, and he. She stopped, felt her throat close up. He's been taking care of me like you asked. More than you asked, probably, and I think maybe you knew he would. I think maybe you knew something I didn't. The thought had been circling in her mind since Cole's confession, landing and taking flight and landing again. Had Daniel known? Had he suspected what Cole felt, what Mara might eventually feel, and made that promise anyway? Or was it just coincidence, just a dying man trying to take care of his wife the only way he knew how? I wish I could ask you, wish I could know if you'd be okay with this or if you'd hate me for it, but I can't. So I'm just going to have to make my own choices and hope I'm not betraying you in the process. She stood up slowly, her knees stiff from sitting on cold ground, and touched the top of his headstone with one hand. I'm going to be happy, she said, and it felt like both a promise and a confession. I'm going to let myself be happy with Cole, and I'm going to try not to feel guilty about it. And if you're somewhere watching, if there's anything after this, I hope you understand. I hope you know I didn't stop loving you. She stopped, took a shaky breath. I just found room for something else, too. The drive back to her ranch felt longer than it should have, like the miles had stretched out while she wasn't paying attention. When she pulled into her driveway, Cole's truck was already there. He was sitting on her porch steps with 2 cups of coffee, and when he saw her, he stood up slow and careful, like he wasn't sure what kind of reception he'd get. I know you said you needed to do that alone, he said as she climbed the steps. But I wanted to be here when you got back, in case you. He stopped, held out one of the coffee cups. In case you needed someone. She took the coffee, took a drink, and made a face. This is terrible. I know. You really need to learn how to make decent coffee. Probably. She set the cup down on the porch railing and kissed him, tasting morning and coffee and something that might have been hope. When she pulled back, his hands were steady on her waist and his eyes were searching her face. You okay? He asked. I don't know. Maybe. Ask me again tomorrow. Fair enough. They sat on the porch steps together, shoulders touching, and watched the day brighten over land that had been both burden and blessing for longer than either of them wanted to count. I told him, Mara said finally, about us, about me not selling, about all of it. What did he say? Nothing. He's dead, Cole. Dead people don't talk back. I know, but sometimes it helps anyway, saying things out loud. Yeah, it did. She leaned her head on his shoulder, felt him press a kiss to her hair. I think he'd be okay with this. With us. I have to believe that or I'll drive myself crazy. He would be, I'm sure of it. How can you be sure? Because he asked me to take care of you, and this, he gestured between them. This is me doing that. just in a different way than either of us expected. She thought about that, about promises and duty and the way love could shift and change and become something new. That's a convenient way to look at it. Doesn't make it less true. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her lawyer. Buyers are threatening to sue. Need to talk ASAP. She showed Cole the screen and he swore under his breath. They really that mad? He asked. Apparently. Jim said they're claiming breach of contract. Can they do that? Probably not. The contract had contingencies and I exercised them, but they can make noise and cost me money and legal fees even if they can't win. How much money? Enough to matter, not enough to make me sell. She put the phone back in her pocket without answering the text. Let them sue. I've got a good lawyer and better reasons for staying. Cole looked at her like she'd just said something profound. You mean that? Yeah, I do. What changed? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. She stood up, pulled him up with her. I spent 10 years trying to honor Daniel's memory by keeping everything exactly the way he left it. The ranch, the house, me. Like if I changed anything, I'd be admitting he was really gone. But you know what I figured out? What? He's gone anyway. Keeping things the same doesn't bring him back. It just keeps me stuck. She squeezed his hand. I don't want to be stuck anymore. So what do you want? I want to fix the barn roof before winter. I want to finally paint the kitchen that color I've been thinking about for 3 years. I want to plant those apple trees I kept putting off because Daniel wasn't here to help. She looked up at him, felt something fierce and certain settle in her chest. And I want you, here, not as my helper or my neighbor or the guy who keeps his promise, as my... She stopped, couldn't quite say the word. As your what? I don't know what to call it yet. Boyfriend sounds stupid at our age. Partner sounds too formal. How about just Cole? Just Cole who what? Just Cole who loves you and wants to build a life with you and doesn't care what we call it as long as you're in it. The words landed soft but sure, and Mara felt tears burn behind her eyes for the second time that day. That works, she said. Just Cole works fine. They spent the rest of the day working side by side on her ranch, not talking much but not needing to. Cole fixed the loose board on the barn door while Mara cleaned out the gutters. They moved around each other with an ease that came from years of doing this dance, but now there was something different underneath it. When their hands brushed reaching for the same tool, they didn't pull away. When they stopped for water, Cole kissed her because he could, not because he had to hide it anymore. It felt normal. It felt revolutionary. It felt like coming home. By late afternoon, word had spread through town like wildfire. Mara's phone kept buzzing with texts, some supportive, some carefully neutral, some that were clearly fishing for gossip. She ignored most of them, answered a few with variations of mind your own business, and blocked 2 numbers that sent messages mean enough to sting. People are talking, she said, scrolling through another round of messages. Let them talk. Betty Morrison says we should be ashamed of ourselves. Betty Morrison needs a hobby that doesn't involve judging other people's lives. Mara smiled despite herself. She also says Daniel's probably rolling in his grave. Cole's expression darkened. She doesn't get to speak for Daniel. Nobody does except Daniel, and he's not here. I know. But it's still... She stopped, tried to find words for the ache in her chest. It still hurts. Knowing people think we were just waiting for him to die. Is that what you think? No, but nothing. You know the truth. I know the truth. That's all that matters. You keep saying that like it's simple. It is simple. We're just making it complicated. She wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the ways this was anything but simple. But before she could, another truck pulled into the driveway. This time it was Sarah Chen, who owned the bakery in town and had been one of Mara's few real friends since Daniel died. Sarah climbed out of her truck with a box in her hands and an expression that was equal parts concerned and curious. I brought pie, she announced. Apple, fresh this morning. Why? Mara asked, suspicious. Because I wanted to check on you without being nosy about it. The pie is my excuse. She glanced at Cole, who was standing close enough to Mara that the implication was clear. Hi, Cole. Sarah. So? Sarah set the pie on the porch railing. The whole town's talking about you two. I gathered that from my phone exploding all afternoon. Most people are saying it's about time. A few people are being assholes. Betty Morrison is leading the asshole brigade, which surprises exactly nobody. That surprised a laugh out of Mara. Is that why you're here? To give me the town gossip report? I'm here because you're my friend, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. The pie is just a bonus. Sarah looked between them again. Are you okay? Both of you? We're figuring it out, Mara said. Good. You deserve to figure it out. She picked up the pie, thrust it at Mara. Now eat this and ignore the assholes. And maybe answer your phone once in a while so people know you're not dead in a ditch somewhere. I'll work on that. Sarah hugged her quick and fierce, whispered, about damn time, in her ear. And then she was gone, leaving them alone with an apple pie and the knowledge that at least one person in town was on their side. She's a good friend, Cole said. Yeah, she is. Mara looked down at the pie, felt something warm settle in her chest. I should probably call my sister too, before she hears it from someone else. You have a sister? Half-sister. Lives in Oregon. We talk maybe 3 times a year, but she'll be pissed if she finds out about this from Facebook. You're on Facebook? No, but she is, and apparently half the town is too based on how fast this is spreading. She called her sister from the porch, while Cole went to check on something in the barn, and spent 20 minutes explaining a decade's worth of complicated history in terms her sister could understand. So you're dating your dead husband's best friend, her sister said when Mara finally finished. That's very Lifetime movie of you. Thanks, that's super helpful. I'm just saying it's dramatic, but also kind of sweet in a messed up way. It's definitely messed up. Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. What? Are you happy with him, with this decision? Mara looked out at the barn where Cole was working, at the land she'd almost sold, at the life she'd almost walked away from. Yeah, I think I am. Then everyone else can shut the hell up, including me. Her sister paused. But seriously, if he hurts you, I'm driving down there and he's going to have problems. Noted. Good. Now send me a picture of him so I can judge whether he's hot enough to be worth all this drama. I'm hanging up now. Love you too. Mara ended the call and sat on the porch steps, feeling lighter than she had in days. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would be gone in minutes. Cole came back from the barn, sat down next to her, and they watched the day end together. Your sister okay with this? He asked. She said if you hurt me, she's going to have problems with you. Fair enough. I'd expect nothing less. She also wants a picture so she can judge if you're hot enough to be worth the drama. That surprised a laugh out of him. And am I? I'll let you know after I take the picture. She pulled out her phone, snapped a quick photo of him looking rumpled and tired and more real than he'd ever looked in the carefully composed images people posted online. Then she sent it to her sister with the caption, "This is Cole. Be nice." The response came fast. Holy hell, Mara. Okay, yeah, I get it now. Approve. She showed Cole the screen and he shook his head, smiling. Your sister has low standards. My sister has eyes. There's a difference. They ate pie straight from the box as the stars came out, not talking much, just being together in a way that felt both new and ancient. And when Cole finally stood to leave, Mara caught his hand. Stay, she said. Your truck was at my place last night. Mine at yours tonight is going to cause even more talk. Let it. I'm done hiding. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked like relief and wonder mixed together. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He kissed her then, soft and slow, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. That seems to be your philosophy on everything lately. It's working so far. They went inside together, and for the first time in 10 years, Mara didn't feel like she was living in a memorial. She felt like she was living in a home. Her home. Their home, maybe, if she was brave enough to let it be. Later, lying in bed with Cole's arm around her and his breathing evening out into sleep, Mara stared at the ceiling and thought about promises and duty and the way love could grow in the spaces between what you planned and what actually happened. Daniel's photo was still on the nightstand. She'd put it there the day after the funeral, and it had stayed there for 10 years, a constant reminder of what she'd lost. But looking at it now, she didn't feel the same crushing grief. She felt sad, yes. She felt the ache of missing someone who'd been taken too soon, but she also felt grateful for the time they'd had, for the home he'd built, for the promise he'd made Cole keep that had inadvertently given her a future she hadn't known she needed. "Thank you," she whispered to the photo, to the memory, to whatever part of Daniel still existed somewhere in the universe. "Thank you for asking him to stay." Cole stirred next to her, pulled her closer in his sleep, and Mara let herself relax into his warmth. Tomorrow, there would be more gossip, more judgment, more complications to navigate. But tonight there was just this, peace and warmth and the quiet certainty that she'd made the right choice. She'd chosen to stay. She'd chosen to fight. She'd chosen to let herself be happy even when it scared her. And wrapped in the arms of a man who'd been waiting for her for 10 years, Mara finally let herself believe that maybe she deserved that happiness after all. The morning brought rain, the kind that settled in for the long haul and turned the ranch roads to mud. Mara woke to the sound of it drumming on the roof and Cole's voice drifting in from the kitchen, talking to someone on the phone. "I understand that, Jim, but she's made her decision," he was saying. "No, I'm not speaking for her. I'm just telling you what she already told you." Mara pulled on yesterday's jeans and one of Cole's shirts and padded out to find him leaning against her counter, phone pressed to his ear, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Here, talk to her yourself," he said when he saw Mara, and thrust the phone at her with visible relief. "Jim?" she said. "Mara, thank God. Your boyfriend's not very good at legal negotiations." "He's not my—" She stopped, looked at Cole, who was watching her with raised eyebrows. "Never mind. What do you need?" "The buyer's lawyer called. They're willing to drop the lawsuit if you'll pay them $50,000 for their time and trouble." $50,000 to walk away from a deal I had every legal right to cancel? That's the ask. I told them to go to hell, but I wanted to run it by you first. Mara looked out the window at the rain-soaked land, at the barn Daniel built, and the fences Cole had been fixing for a decade, and the life she'd almost walked away from. "Counter with 20 and tell them if they don't take it, I'll see them in court." "You sure? 20's still a lot of money." "It's cheaper than lawyers, and I want this done. I want them gone and out of my life so I can move on." There was a pause on the other end. "You sound different." "Different how?" "Like you actually know what you want for once." "Yeah, well, took me long enough." She handed the phone back to Cole. "Your turn. I need coffee." She made a fresh pot while Cole finished the call, and this time she made it strong enough to taste like something other than disappointment. When he hung up, he came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pressed his face into her hair. "20,000 is a lot of money," he said. "I know." "I could help." "No." She turned in his arms to face him. "This is my mess. My decision. My money. Our money if we're doing this for real." The word hung between them, "our," and Mara felt something shift in her chest. "Are we?" she asked. "Doing this for real?" "I am, if you are." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is. It's just not the answer you're used to hearing." He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "I'm all in, Mara. I've been all in since before I had any right to be. The question is whether you're ready to be all in too." She thought about it, about what all in meant. Not just dating, not just seeing where things went, but actually building a life together, merging ranches and bank accounts and futures in a way that was permanent and terrifying and exactly what she wanted if she was brave enough to take it. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too." "What if we mess this up? What if we're better as whatever we were before?" "We were miserable before, lonely and lying to ourselves and wasting years we can't get back." "We were safe before." "Safe isn't the same as happy." He cupped her face in both hands, made her look at him. "I'd rather have messy and real with you than safe and empty without you, but I need to know you feel the same way." "I do. I'm just—" She stopped, tried to find words for the fear still coiled tight in her stomach. "What if people never stop judging us? What if every time we go to town someone's looking at us like we did something wrong? Then we stop going to town, or we go anyway and let them look." He kissed her forehead, soft and sure. "Their opinions don't get a vote in our lives, Mara. Only we do. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe it could be that simple. But the doubt was still there, stubborn and sharp. I need to do something, she said, before I lose my nerve. What? Come with me. She grabbed her truck keys and headed out into the rain, not bothering with a coat, just letting the water soak through Cole's borrowed shirt as she climbed into the cab. Cole followed without question, sliding into the passenger seat with rain dripping off his hair. Where are we going? He asked. You'll see. She drove into town, windshield wipers working overtime, and pulled up in front of the feed store where Betty Morrison held court most mornings, with whoever would listen to her opinions on how other people should live their lives. Mara, what are you… Wait here. She got out of the truck and walked into the feed store, dripping rainwater and looking, she was sure, like something the barn cat dragged in. Betty was behind the counter as expected, along with Frank Patterson and two other ranchers Mara recognized but couldn't name. The conversation stopped when she walked in. Mara, Betty said, her voice carefully neutral in a way that screamed judgment. Didn't expect to see you here. I bet you didn't. Mara walked up to the counter, water pooling at her feet. I hear you've been talking about me. I don't know what you… Yes, you do. You've been telling anyone who'll listen that Cole and I should be ashamed of ourselves, that we were carrying on behind Daniel's back, that we disrespected his memory. She kept her voice level with effort. So I came here to set the record straight. Betty's face had gone red. Now listen here. No, you listen. Daniel was a good man and I loved him, and losing him damn near broke me. And for 10 years I tried to honor his memory by keeping everything exactly the way he left it, including myself. But you know what that got me? 10 years of being lonely and stuck and too scared to live my own life. That doesn't mean you should… Should what? Be happy? Move on? Let someone care about me who isn't dead? Mara felt her voice rising and didn't try to stop it. Cole Barrett has been taking care of my ranch and me for a decade without asking for a damn thing in return. He's fixed my fences and chopped my wood and shown up every time I needed help. And the whole time he was doing it out of love, not duty. Love. And I'm done pretending otherwise. The store had gone completely quiet. Even Frank looked uncomfortable. Daniel's been gone 10 years, Mara continued. 10 years, Betty. At some point, I have to be allowed to have a life that doesn't revolve around being his widow. And if that bothers you, if that offends your sense of what's proper, then that's your problem, not mine. People will talk, Betty said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Let them. They're going to talk anyway. Might as well give them something worth talking about. Mara turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. And for the record, Daniel asked Cole to take care of me. That's exactly what he's doing. So if you've got a problem with it, take it up with a dead man. She walked out before anyone could respond, climbed back into the truck where Cole was waiting with an expression somewhere between shock and admiration. Did you just… Yeah, I did. That was stupid? Reckless? Going to make everything worse? I was going to say amazing. He was grinning now, wide and genuine. You just told off Betty Morrison in front of half the morning coffee crowd. She deserved it. She absolutely did. He leaned across the seat and kissed her, still smiling. I love you. The words came out casual, like he'd said them 100 times before, and it took Mara's brain a second to catch up. What? I love you. I know I haven't said it out loud yet, but I figured after that display you should probably know. You're telling me this now? In the feed store parking lot in the pouring rain? Seems as good a time as any. She laughed, felt something bright and warm bloom in her chest. You're an idiot. Yeah, but I'm your idiot. I love you too. The words came easier than she expected, true and terrifying and exactly right. Just so you know. I know, I've known for a while. How long is a while? You're 6, maybe 7. You have a tell. I do not. You do. You bite your lip when you look at me and you think I'm not watching. That's… She stopped, realized he was right. Okay, fine. I have a tell, but you're still an idiot for waiting this long to say something. We both are. But at least we're done waiting. They drove back to the ranch in comfortable silence. the rain letting up to a drizzle by the time they pulled into the driveway. Cole's truck was still there from the night before, and now Mara's was here too, and she realized with a start that she didn't care who saw them or what they thought about it. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new rhythm that felt both strange and inevitable. Cole started keeping some of his things at Mara's place: a toothbrush in the bathroom, spare clothes in the closet, his terrible coffee in the kitchen. They worked their ranches during the day and came together at night, sometimes at her place, sometimes at his, learning each other's routines and habits and the thousand small ways two people fit together when they stop fighting it. The town talked, of course, but after Mara's confrontation with Betty Morrison, the talk had shifted from scandalous to resigned acceptance. People stopped being quite so pointed with their comments. Sarah Chen kept bringing by baked goods and moral support. Even Frank Patterson had thawed enough to ask Cole for advice on some fence work, which was as close to approval as Frank ever got. The buyer's lawyer accepted the $20,000 settlement, and the deal officially died. Mara signed the papers in Jim's office with Cole beside her, and when it was done, she felt lighter than she had in months. "No regrets?" Jim asked. "Not even one." Good, because that was a hell of a lot of money to walk away from. It was worth it. And it was. Every penny of it was worth waking up in a home that felt alive again instead of frozen in time. 3 months after that morning in the barn, when everything had finally broken open, Mara stood at the old well that marked the boundary between her property and Cole's. The well had been dry for decades, the stone crumbling and covered in moss, but it was still there, a marker of where one ranch ended and another began. Cole found her there as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that made the whole world look like it was on fire. "You're thinking too hard," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I can hear it from the barn." "I'm not thinking, I'm just—" She stopped, tried to find words for what she was feeling. "Looking at this line, this boundary between my place and yours." "What about it?" "I was thinking maybe we should get rid of it." He went very still beside her. "Get rid of it how?" "Merge the properties. Officially. No more your ranch and my ranch. Just ours." She looked up at him, heart pounding. "What do you think?" "I think—" He stopped, and she watched him struggle with something. "I think you should be sure before you make that kind of decision." "I am sure." "Mara, combining properties is permanent. If this doesn't work out, it'll work out. You can't know that." "No, I can't, but I can choose to believe it anyway." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "I spent 10 years being scared of change, being scared of moving forward, being scared of letting go of the past long enough to build a future. I'm done being scared." "You're not scared at all?" "I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled at that, pulled her close. "That really is your philosophy on everything now, isn't it? It's working so far." "Yeah, it is." He kissed the top of her head. "Okay, let's do it. Merge the ranches, build something new." "Just like that?" "Just like that. I've been waiting 10 years for you to be ready. I'm not going to argue now that you finally are." They stood there as the sun finished setting, two people with a decade of history and a future that was still unwritten, and Mara felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger, hope, maybe, or determination, or just the simple certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The paperwork to merge the properties took another month, lawyers and surveyors and endless forms that all needed signing. But finally, on a cold November morning with snow threatening in the air, it was done. 1,600 acres under one deed, 2 houses that now belonged to both of them, a future they were building together from the bones of the past. "We should celebrate," Cole said, looking at the final document spread across Mara's kitchen table. "How?" "I don't know. Dinner in town? Actually go somewhere public as a couple instead of hiding out here?" "We're not hiding. We're also not exactly advertising." He had a point. They'd been careful, even after going public, to keep their relationship mostly private. Not hiding exactly, but not flaunting it either. Waiting for the dust to settle before pushing too hard. "Okay," Mara said. "Let's go to dinner. The steakhouse on Main, Saturday night when everyone will see us." "You sure?" No, but I'm doing it anyway. Saturday came cold and clear, the kind of night where the stars looked close enough to touch. Mara wore the blue dress she'd bought years ago and never had occasion to wear. And when Cole showed up at her door in a clean shirt and actual dress pants, she barely recognized him. "You clean up nice," she said. "So do you. That dress is—" He stopped, seemed to lose his train of thought. "Is what?" "Dangerous. You're wearing a dangerous dress." She laughed, felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Come on, let's go scandalize the town." The steakhouse was packed, Saturday night being one of the few times the town actually had nightlife to speak of. Mara felt every head turn when they walked in together, felt the weight of a dozen conversations pausing mid-sentence. "Still want to do this?" Cole asked quietly. "Yeah, I do." They got a table by the window, ordered steaks and beer, and tried to pretend the entire restaurant wasn't watching them. But halfway through the meal, Mara realized something that surprised her. She didn't care. Let them watch. Let them judge. Let them whisper behind their hands about the widow and her dead husband's best friend. None of it changed the fact that she was happy. Really, genuinely happy for the first time in a decade. "What are you smiling about?" Cole asked. "Nothing. Everything. The fact that Betty Morrison is sitting 3 tables over trying not to stare at us. Should we wave?" "Probably not, but I kind of want to." He grinned, reached across the table to take her hand. "You've changed." "Is that good or bad?" "It's good. Really good. You're more—" He stopped, searching for the right word. "More yourself, if that makes sense." "It does. I feel more myself. Like I spent 10 years being someone I thought I should be, and I finally remembered who I actually am." "And who's that?" "Someone who doesn't give a damn what Betty Morrison thinks." He laughed at that, squeezed her hand. "I love you. I love you too." The words came easy now, natural as breathing, and Mara realized with a start that she'd stopped waiting for guilt to follow them. She'd stopped expecting to feel bad about being happy. Somewhere in the last few months, without quite noticing, she'd forgiven herself for moving on. They finished dinner and drove home under a sky full of stars, and when they pulled up to the ranch, their ranch, singular, not divided anymore, Mara felt something click into place. "Come with me," she said. "I want to show you something." She led him not to the house but to the barn, to the loft where she'd stacked boxes years ago and never gone through because it hurt too much to look at what was inside. Daniel's things, his clothes and books, and the 100 small objects that had belonged to him and no one else. "Help me with these," she said, pulling down the first box. "Mara, you don't have to—" "I want to. I should have done this years ago." They spent the next hour going through boxes in the lamplight, sorting through a dead man's possessions with careful hands and the kind of reverence that comes from loving someone even after they're gone. Mara kept some things, the photo albums, a favorite hat, the pocket watch his grandfather had given him, but most of it she set aside to donate, to give to people who could use it, instead of letting it gather dust in a barn. "This is good," Cole said quietly, holding up a flannel shirt that had been Daniel's favorite. "This is healthy." "Is it? Or am I just erasing him?" "You're not erasing him. You're making room for both of us. There's a difference." She looked at him sitting on the barn floor surrounded by boxes and memories and felt a surge of love so strong it made her chest ache. "He'd like you doing this," Cole continued. "He'd like knowing you're moving forward instead of staying stuck." "How do you know?" "Because I knew him, and because he loved you enough to want you to be happy, even if he couldn't be here to see it." Mara felt tears burn behind her eyes, but didn't try to stop them. "I miss him." "I know, me too. But I'm also happy, with you, with this, and that feels complicated. I know, but that's okay. It's allowed to be both." They finished sorting through the boxes as the night deepened around them, and when it was done, Mara felt lighter. Not because she'd forgotten Daniel or stopped loving him, but because she'd finally made peace with the fact that love didn't have to be exclusive, that the heart could hold more than one person at a time, that honoring the past didn't mean sacrificing the future. The next morning dawned clear and cold, frost painting the windows in intricate patterns. Mara woke to find Cole already up, standing by the window and looking out at their combined property, with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The future. What we're going to build here." "And what are we going to build?" He turned to face her, and the smile on his face made her breath catch. "Whatever we want. That's the whole point, isn't it? We get to decide. No more living for someone else. No more being stuck in what was. Just figuring out what comes next." "That sounds scary." "I know, but also kind of amazing." She got out of bed, crossed to the window to stand beside him. The land stretched out before them, 800 acres times 2, enough space to build a dozen futures if they wanted. "I was thinking," Cole said slowly, "about those apple trees you mentioned, the ones you never planted because Daniel wasn't here to help. What about them?" "I could help. We could plant them together, start something new that's just ours." The offer was simple, but it landed with weight, and Mara felt tears burn hot behind her eyes. "Yeah," she said, "I'd like that." They spent the day working side by side, measuring out space for the orchard, marking where each tree would go. It was cold enough that they could see their breath, but neither of them cared. They were building something, not replacing what was lost, but adding to it, growing something new from soil that had seen both joy and grief. By evening, they had the whole orchard planned out, 20 trees that would take years to bear fruit, but would stand as proof that they'd been here, that they'd chosen this life, that they'd been brave enough to plant roots even when the future was uncertain. "It's going to be beautiful," Mara said, looking at the stakes marking where each tree would go. "Yeah, it is. Thank you for this, for all of it."
"I didn't do anything. This was your idea." "No, I mean—" She stopped, tried to find words for what she was feeling. "Thank you for waiting, for staying, for loving me even when I was too scared to love you back." "Mara, let me finish, please." She took his hand, held it tight. "You could have left. Any time in the last 10 years you could have walked away, and nobody would have blamed you. But you didn't. You stayed. You kept showing up. You kept being there even when it hurt. And I—" She stopped, felt her throat close up. "I don't know if I ever said thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because what you did, what you've been doing, it saved me. Not from anything dramatic, but from myself. From giving up. From forgetting that life was still worth living even after the worst thing happened." Cole pulled her close, pressed his face into her hair. "You saved yourself, Mara. I just stuck around to watch." "We saved each other then. How about that?" "Yeah, I can live with that." They stood there as the sun set over their combined property, over the orchard they would plant together, over a future that was finally theirs to build. And Mara thought about promises and duty and the way love could transform from one thing into another without ever really changing at its core. Cole had loved her for 10 years. She'd loved him back for almost as long, even if she'd been too scared to admit it. And Daniel had loved them both enough to trust that they'd take care of each other after he was gone. Maybe he'd known all along what would happen. Maybe he'd suspected, had seen something between them that they couldn't see themselves. Or maybe it was just luck. Just the way life worked out sometimes when you stopped fighting it long enough to let it surprise you. Either way, standing here with Cole's arms around her and the future spread out before them like a gift, Mara finally understood what it meant to choose happiness over guilt, hope over fear, life over the careful preservation of what was dead and gone. "I'm staying," she said, even though they both already knew it. "Not because the ranch needs me, not because selling would be wrong, but because this is where I want to be. With you. Building something new. I'm glad. Because I wasn't kidding about not going anywhere." He kissed the top of her head. "This is it for me. You're it for me." "That's a lot of pressure." "Good. Maybe it'll keep you from running." "I'm not running anymore." "No, you're not." He turned her to face him, cupped her face in both hands. "You're staying. You're fighting. You're living instead of just surviving. And I'm—" He stopped, smiled. "I'm the luckiest bastard alive to get to do this with you." She kissed him then, there at the edge of what would become an orchard, on land that was finally, fully theirs. And in that moment, with the sun setting and the stars beginning to emerge,
and 10 years of silence finally, completely broken, Mara Whitlock knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the safe choice, but the right one. The choice to stay, the choice to love, the choice to believe that even after everything, there was still room for something beautiful and new and worth the risk. The choice to live. And standing there with Cole Barrett, the man who'd waited a decade for her to be ready, she finally understood what Daniel had known all along. That the best way to honor the past wasn't to preserve it like a museum piece, but to build on it, to let it inform the future without controlling it, to carry the love forward into whatever came next. The ranch remained. The silence ended. And in the vast, unforgiving frontier of Wyoming, two people who'd spent 10 years dancing around the truth finally learned the hardest lesson of all. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running from happiness and let yourself have it. Even when it scares you, especially when it scares you, because that's what it means to be alive.